Hello everyone and welcome into a brand new edition of the GSMC Dead Ball Sports Podcast. You heard that correctly. GSMC's Fantasy Sports Podcast is no more. I am now your host of the GSMC Dead Ball Sports Podcast, Christopher Shepard, here on this lovely Wednesday afternoon. A new chapter in my GSMC career, moving on over from talking all things fantasy to now all things sports in general. So we're going to have a lot of discussions about many different sports here on this show, whether it be football, college basketball, if you guys really like that, basketball, NBA, hockey, maybe even another kind of football across the pond, which we'll be talking about a little bit today. But it is, like I said, a new era here at the GSMC Sports Network that I'm really excited to bring to you guys. It is an honor to host this new edition of the GSMC Dead Ball Sports Podcast. It's going to be quite the ride, my friends, and I'm glad you're going to be joining it with me. We're going to have a very football-heavy show, also another kind of football coming up at the end of this show as we talk about unexpected top-of-the-table clash in the Premier League over there, but mostly American football will be the point of emphasis today. We'll be previewing all the wildcard games, specifically in the AFC. We'll be talking about some reactions to some head coach and offensive coordinator firings, namely the firing of Doug Peterson by the Jacksonville Jaguars and Ryan Grubb by the Seattle Seahawks. So it's going to be a very football-heavy show. And then our last segment will be European football talk as we talk about Forest, Liverpool, across the pond. But before we get into any of that exciting, fun stuff on our first show here at the GSMC Dead Ball Sports Podcast, I do want to remind you that if you want to interact with the show, like, follow, and subscribe so you can get more content such as this. But if you want to do it a little bit more directly throughout its duration, consider making yourselves available to, as always, the Super Chat, Super Thanks, and Super Stickers features. You can also do it through your website, gsmcpodcast.net. You can leave a tip or donation there. And also any questions, comments, or concerns you may have throughout the show's duration. This is a new show. I really want your input. I want to see what you guys like, which sports you want me talking about a little bit more as we get away from football perhaps. Maybe basketball or hockey might be something that appeals to you. I want to be able to cover all bases for you guys, make the show that much better, that much more interactive, and I love hearing from you as always in the comment section. Without further ado, let us jump right into our first segment of a new era here at the GSMC Sports Network. The GSMC Dead Ball Sports Podcast is back and better than ever. Let's talk about one of the AFC Wildcard game matchups between the Chargers and Texans, a 5-4 matchup that certainly seems a little bit unusual and unique in its appearance, as the Chargers and Texans really have taken very divergent paths to this point. But let's start off with the Houston Texans here in this matchup. As the higher seed, I don't want to go that far just yet. As the higher seed here, they reached the playoffs as the AFC South champion, but this year was much more challenging for them than people think. After a great first year of the D'Amico Ryans and CJ Stroud era, where CJ Stroud was breaking a lot of rookie records last year, becoming one of the more prolific passers of the football last year, kind of regressed to the mean this year as well as D'Amico Ryan's philosophies a little bit, even though we're going to talk about the defense a little bit later in this segment. Let's talk about the offense a little bit. CJ Stroud was pressured on 35.8% of his dropbacks, the fourth most in the entire NFL, and as a result, inconsistencies along the offensive line, injuries to that wide receiver core added all up, and it was not a very convincing season over in Houston. Now let's talk with the Chargers a little bit, because they took a very circuitous route here. Hired Jim Harbaugh after the ineptitudes of the Brandon Staley era, really thought that he would be right in rejuvenating them immediately. Some of his first acquisitions were of J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards to establish that he really wanted to transition to a more run-heavy philosophy in L.A. Really got Justin Herbert to buy into it, and yes, Justin Herbert statistically had his worst season of his entire career this year, but it benefited the team because of the run-heavy philosophies that Jim Harbaugh was able to implement. On the defensive side of the football, he brought in fellow Michigan man Jesse Minter to revamp this defense, and it's looking better than ever, even with all the young players they have well within their secondary and their front, really looking very strong. So this makes for a very intriguing AFC Wildcard 5-4 matchup here, because it seems like it's very even. But I can certainly see why the Chargers surprisingly could be the favorites even on the road here in this match. But let's talk about the keys for each of these teams headed into this wild card matchup here, starting off with the Texans, because the Texans' MO this season is highly different from what it was last season, whereas you got a more complementary approach from both your offense and your defense that balance each other out and really pay dividends. I feel like this year it's all about the defense, because the offensive ineptitudes are myriad. They are a vast problem that they need to find out how to adjust come postseason time, come this game. But let's focus on the defense here, because the defense can truly impact the outcome of this football game. Let's talk about how they can generate pressure. They are a strong defense, mainly in that front. Guys like Will Anderson, guys like Danielle Hunter, very strong at generating pressure on the quarterback. In fact, they are one of the league leaders in allowing QBR to opposing quarterbacks with a league-high 54.7. They're fourth in the league in sacks with 49. So obviously, the center point of this team stems from its defense. Getting pressure consistently on Justin Herbert, who may not necessarily like being forced to pass as often. They want to establish the run to the Chargers, and we're going to talk about how they can do that effectively in this game so as the pressure on Justin Herbert doesn't steadily mount. But ultimately, that's how Houston stays in this game. Get enough stops, hopefully change the field position battle in your favor, and ultimately create shorter drives for your offense to where they feel they can get into a rhythm. Because right now, the Houston offense is not coming in looking all that good. They're 18th in scoring. They just lost Tank Dell a couple weeks ago to injury. They already did lose Stephon Diggs, and even with Nico Collins back from his own injury problems, you still don't necessarily have offense you can rely upon. I don't really trust guys like Robert Woods or John Mechie to really step up. So they're going to have to try and run the football, which is kind of a mirage for them. They seem like they're a good rushing football team, but it's mainly due to what Joe Mixon can do on his own and not anything to do with the power of this offensive line, which has really struggled this year. So I'm really looking at this Houston defense to step up and try and make this game as close as possible, really muddy this game enough so that the offense can try and keep up with what the Chargers do. In terms of what the Chargers' game plan is, I think it lies in their offense, because this offense has been majorly inconsistent all year long. And while they really do rely upon the run, this run game has had its bumps along the road. They've lost J.K. Dobbins this season for a couple of weeks. They probably are going to get him back pretty soon, maybe as soon as this game. They did just pick up Ezekiel Elliott after the Cowboys kind of shockingly dropped him, and we can get into that whole situation. But it is a decent pickup, but not necessarily a pickup I'm immediately swayed by due to their already interesting running style. But ultimately, I do think for the Chargers to advance, they need to run the football efficiently. And I feel like the best parts of this Chargers offense stem from getting into second and third and manageable situations, because I feel like the run game operates best when you do it on early downs if you're the Chargers, and the Chargers have been pretty decent at getting those chunk yardage plays from their running backs, Dobbins and Edwards, even though Edwards struggled in his absence. But still, I do feel that's the best part of this Chargers offense, because it allows Justin Herbert to relax into the game. When he's forced to pass is when I feel the Chargers struggle most, because if Justin Herbert is forced to pass, then I feel like it goes away from what the Chargers have learned under Harbaugh, which is to retain possession by running the football and really, really controlling the game as a result. So look for the Chargers to want to establish the run immediately, because if they don't, I feel that this defense of the Texans could get home a little bit more often. And so I feel like even though Justin Herbert can come alive at certain points in critical moments, and we've seen it from him this season, even with those statistical lows, those career lows this season, I feel like at certain moments he can amp it up a little bit, but he doesn't want to be forced to. And that's the point I'm trying to get at here, because that's where I feel the Chargers can be favored in this game. For the first time in quite some time, though, I can't really tell you the spread because I'm losing kind of that fantasy mindset just now. So I'm just going to pick this game and say that the Chargers go into the postseason looking just a little bit better. I feel like this Texans defense can keep it close for about 55 minutes of this game. It's going to come down to that last 5 minutes in which offense or defense really blinks first. And I just think the Chargers are just a little bit that more stronger in their identity, in how they feel they can win this game. And ultimately, I do think they eke out a close one. I'm going to say 24-20 here as Justin Herbert leads them down the field with an efficient 2-minute drill-like drive to the point where he throws a game-winning touchdown pass to Ladd McConkey in the red zone. I feel like this Chargers team is more ready than the Texans, and the Texans has truly declined enough for me to really worry about the outlook of this team going forward as well. So I'm taking the Chargers here, 24-20. I feel like the Chargers should be favored even on the road in this game. Don't quote me on that. I might have to check the spread after the show to really talk about it a little bit more. But ultimately, that is my pick for this first game of the wild card weekend. Let me know what you think of this game in the comments. I could see it going either way. I'm just a little bit more leaning towards the Chargers in this one. But I'll just about do it for our first segment here on the GSMC Dead Ball Sports Podcast. Coming up next, we preview Steelers-Ravens 3.0 and this interesting, historic matchup, this rivalry renewed in a playoff setting. You definitely don't want to miss it right after this short break.
I feel like I'm losing my mind.